Good evening, everyone. Thank you for attending the work session of the City of Binghamton, Binghamton City Council, 6 p.m. Tuesday, 11th of April, 2023. Please stand for the pledge. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Clerk will call the roll. Mr. Clerk.
Okay, Councilwoman Rosnetti,
Aye.
Councilwoman Riley,
Present. Oh.
Councilwoman Fried.
Present, that's what I meant.
Aye.
Thank you.
That's okay. Councilwoman Friedman,
Here, present.
Councilman Burns,
Present.
Councilman Strawn,
Present here and I.
Councilman Scanlon is absent and President Scringy.
Present.
That's 6 here, 1 absent. Scanlon.
Thank you, Mr. Clerk. At this time, Chair will recognize Councilwoman Rosnetti for the purposes of a motion.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'd like to make a motion to approve the minutes from the March 29th, 2023 business meeting.
Do I hear a second?
Second,
Motion by Councilwoman Rosnetti, seconded by Councilwoman Friedman. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 All those against, nay. Minutes pass unanimously. Thank you very much. At this time, we will proceed to public comment. Residents wishing to submit public comment may do so electronically by emailing their comments prior to 1 p.m. on the day of the meeting to clerk@cityofbinghamton.gov or in person during the meeting. If you are here in person, you will have 5 minutes to speak. Please state your name and whether you work or live in the city of Binghamton. Seeing none, we'll move on with the first read legislation and preferred agenda. Council, at this time, are there any members that wish to remove any individual requests for legislation from the preferred agenda? Councilwoman Freeman.
Thank you, President Scringy. I don't wish to remove any legislation, but I'm looking through my packet here and my name is whited out as a sponsor on introductory ordinance 23-73. I think I sponsored that though, or I intended to. I'm not,
Sorry, you may have missed it on the sponsorship sheet. But no, as of today, your name wasn't on it, so we removed your name. It's tricky with the Monday, Tuesday meetings because we had to post the packet last night before our work session.
okay. Right. And when I was looking at the packet, it was the digital one, not this one here. So. Okay.
Councilwoman,
I mean,
would
I'm happy to add my name as a
I was
sponsor
gonna
to
say,
keep
would
this
you
on
like
the
to-
preferred agenda.
Okay.
Yeah.
Mr. Clerk, please put it on the record that introductory ordinance 23-73, an ordinance to amend the 2023 budget for partial demolition of the porch at 21 Dickinson Street, is co-sponsored by Councilwoman Friedman.
Thank you. I'm sorry about that. I did intend to sponsor this.
Thank you,
No worries.
Councilwoman.
Thank you.
Anything to be removed? Seeing none. Introductory ordinance 23-67, Mr. Clerk.
Okay, our first item on tonight's preferred agenda is introductory ordinance 23-67, considered in finance. And this is an ordinance to amend the 2023 Binghamton Johnson City Joint Sewage Treatment Facilities budget for equipment, capital outlay, and insurance recoveries.
Discussion. Seeing none, Mr. Clerk.
Next, we have introductory ordinance 23-72, considered in finance. And this is an ordinance to amend the 2023 Parks and Recreation budget to defund an MEO position and fund a groundskeeper position.
Discussion. Seeing none, Mr. Clerk.
Next, we have introductory ordinance 23-73, considered in finance. And this is an ordinance to amend the 2023 budget for partial demolition of the porch at 21 Dickinson Street.
Discussion. Seeing none, Mr. Clerk.
Next, we have introductory ordinance 23-74 considered in finance, and this is an ordinance to amend the 2023 fire budget to defund 8 first grade firefighter positions and fund 8 probationary firefighter positions.
Discussion. Seeing none, I will entertain a motion to accept the preferred agenda. Councilwoman Riley?
Thank you, Council President. Yesterday, I thought we had an expedited document regarding the retirement fund for the firemen. And we received the 2 pieces of legislation from the Senate and the Assembly.
Yeah, I sent those out earlier
Yes.
today. Mr. Clerk? Was that meant to be expedited? I thought it was.
Yeah, I thought it was.
The
That was the one for the 25-year retirement option
Mhm.
for firefighters. There was the home rule legislation as with it, as well as the respective RLs from Assemblywoman Lepardo and Senator Webb.
I don't see that on our agenda. I wasn't at yesterday's meeting. I'm not sure.
Okay,
Yes.
I'll circle it back. Thank you. Appreciate it. Thank you, Councilwoman. Is there a motion to approve the preferred agenda?
I move that we approve the preferred agenda as read.
Second,
Do I have it? Motion by Councilwoman Riley, seconded by Councilwoman Friedman. Clerk will call the roll. Mr. Clerk.
Councilwoman Rusnetti,
Aye.
Councilwoman Riley,
Aye.
Councilwoman Friedman,
aye.
Councilman Burns,
Aye.
Councilman Strong,
Aye.
Councilman Scanlon is absent, and President Scrunchie.
Aye.
That's 6 ayes, 1 absent, Scanlon.
Thank you, Mr. Clerk. Now we'll move on to the non-preferred agenda. At this time, the chair recognizes Councilman Strawn for the purposes of a motion.
Excuse me. Thank you, Mr. President. I ask council for unanimous consideration of introductory ordinance 23-68, an ordinance approving a transfer from the Capital Reserve Parking Garage for the Water Street Development Project.
Do I hear a second? Motion by Councilman Strawn, seconded by Councilwoman Resonetti. Discussion. Councilwoman Riley.
Yes, this is again something we spoke at length with Chuck Shager during the work session. And he did subsequently today send information about the change in budget for the parking garage and all of the updates that were required and may still be amended until that structure is fully erected. Again, when it was proposed, the parking garage, I vehemently opposed such use of the funding because it was ARPA that was generated as lost, and we did some things with it. And we do understand that the city of Binghamton is in need of housing. But we also talked at length with the developers about what type of housing Binghamton needs. As this is part of that entire process, I again want to verbalize my discontent with our desire to build this particular structure at this time when we can project that the budget that was brought before council will be significantly different once the project has moved forward to development and completion. So I just wanted to make sure I, again, highlighted those concerns. And I will repeat something similar as we talk about lost revenue with ARPA funds as we proceed through the agenda. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilwoman. Any other discussion? Seeing none, is the question called? Questions have been called. Clerk will call the roll. Mr. Clerk.
Councilwoman Rusnetti,
Aye.
Councilwoman Riley,
Nay.
Councilwoman Friedman,
Aye.
Councilman Burns,
Aye.
Councilman Strong,
Aye.
Councilman Scanlon is absent, and President Scrunchie.
Aye.
That's 5 ayes, 1 nay Riley, 1 absent Scanlon.
Thank you, Mr. Clerk. At this time, Chair recognizes Councilman Strawn for purposes of a motion.
Thank you, Mr. President. I ask council for unanimous consideration of introductory ordinance 23-69. An ordinance to account for lost revenue of $500,000 per the American Rescue Plan Act guidelines.
Do I have a second? Motion by Councilman Strawn, seconded by Councilwoman Resonetti. Discussion.
Mr. President,
Councilman Burns.
yeah, thank you. The whole lost revenue from the ARPA because of COVID. And when we got the money from the federal government, I wish the mayor would, when we do these things, would thank the Democratic Party, because every Republican in Congress voted no for us to get this money. And I never heard a thank you to the Democrats for that. Anyway, when it came to the lost revenue of the ARPA funds, when the discussion first came up that we could fill the holes caused by COVID in our budget, our comptroller said that he could come up with $5 or $6 million that he thought that we had lost. Now, when that wasn't enough, we then bring in this third party that I guess other cities had luck with it, and they came up with this what I consider a convoluted way of figuring out the math. I think President Bush called it fuzzy math one time in one of his famous lines during a discussion on television with his opponent that year. But they put in this equation, and so we went from 5 million to, I think it was 12 or 13 million dollars. So I just didn't like the way I didn't like that process. I know that one of my colleagues enjoys that word, but I didn't like that process at all. And I just felt it was a way of, I like the way that we've used a lot of the money of ARPA. And I just think that now coming up with another 500,000, when we still have in the lost revenue line in our budget, we still have $3.5 million left over from that initial money that they took out. So we don't know where that money's going. So why aren't we using that money? And we also are told that we have 15 million, although when the accountants came in, they said it was more like 5 million, but I'm told it's over $10 million in the reserve fund that we have. And I think that would be nice use of that money, because I think the plan is to help the facades is fantastic. And I plan on voting for that. I'm going to vote yes for that, but I just don't like the way that the money is handled, that it's considered I don't want to say slush fund, but it's considered the gravy train is there, and we're just going to take it until it's all gone. And we can find uses that for it that is really needed, and the community should have more to say about where the money's going. Anyway, that's it. Thanks.
Thank you, Councilman. Any other discussion? Councilwoman Freeman.
Thank you, President Scaringi. I agree with my colleague, Councilman Burns, and I think that this piece of legislation was proposed as a package with the following piece of legislation. And so I can't parse them out. I think that they have to be considered in tandem. And when you consider them in tandem with each other, it's clear that we're taking ARPA money, doing a little thing with it, a little magic trick to make it count as lost revenue so that it can then be used for something that it was not intended for. It's an inappropriate use of funding. And I agree. I think that the commercial facade matching grant program sounds wonderful. And we've seen that there has already been high interest in it. But this is just simply not where the money should come from. It's not appropriate. This is so blatantly skirting the rules, because if it was an appropriate use of funds, we could just use it for that. I don't know that I would even still think that it was appropriate then, but clearly this is not. We have to specifically do something to make the money so that it's not what it is anymore. And maybe in 2021, we did lose $500,000 of revenue to COVID. Maybe we did, but the fact that it's, again, the same amount of money going from lost revenue to then going to this grant program shows that it's not lost revenue. This is just a way to make it to free up the money and not have to abide by the guidelines, which, again, and as I've said over and over again, are excellent guidelines. The reason why we had this money was because of COVID. COVID exacerbated so many things that were dire: housing, access to food, people's livelihoods, people's mental health, substance use disorder, like all of these things that are just absolutely dire. And then to blatantly be like, well, this is a big old pot of money that technically we can't use for this, so we're going to put it in lost revenue and then immediately take it back out again. That just, it doesn't sit right with me. It's not right by the residents of the city who were really, really egregiously harmed by COVID-19. So the facade program, it sounds wonderful. I think it's a great use of money, but not this money. I can't support this. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilwoman. Councilwoman Riley.
Thank you, Council President. Again, if we had an intern or an employee that we could just ask to roll the footage, as I mentioned yesterday, we would be able to show hours and hours of me saying the same thing about why ARPA funds were allocated to this city, and speak to the nature of our constituency in terms of their economic well-being status, what have you. Our children would not be eligible for free lunch if we were at the top in terms of those earners and again, having the highest of the highs amongst the communities in the Southern Tier, which is why Binghamton received the ARPA funding that it did. I believe we received more than the county. So that tells you the condition and the status of our residents. And in that legislation, it provided uses for ARPA funding. There was, however, the one loophole of the allowable loss revenue generation or use of lost revenue using the calculation. And there's a difference between permissible or allowable and mandatory. Just because it's permitted doesn't mean we have to do it. Because I think if we were to listen again to the footage during COVID of the residents that poured their hearts out with needs and ideas, or even if we looked at the CDAC meetings where there are social service agencies here with ideas, but inability to fund said ideas, again, targeting the needs of our residents, then we may rethink how we're spending this money. Yes, we want to stimulate economic development and the well-being of businesses. Businesses bring jobs, jobs bring people. You know, it's a cycle. And so, yes, I support things that our business owners desire, like waiving the ability to have seating on the walkway, because sitting and eating outside is something we came to enjoy during COVID. That's one example. The second is the facade program. There are several ideas. The city of Syracuse or the county, I think it's Onondaga, don't quote me, but they have a program using ARPA funding where residents are able to receive grants to revitalize their homes, regardless of their age. Think about how many of your neighbors could use an extra $5,000, $2,000 to renovate a porch or repair the roof, but they don't meet the criteria for the partnership with Jerry Willard's organization. I can't think of it right now. First Ward Action Council.
First award, yeah.
So yes, we funded that one for our seniors so that they can dwell safely at home. But then I just found out you can't reapply if you've received funding once for another set of years. So then we have another subset of the population still in need, but wanting to reside at home, but need assistance, a little bit of a leg up. Those are the kinds of things ARPA funding would be great for. Think about it. We're contributing to the revitalization of our neighborhoods by people who live and own property. That means we want them to stay here. We want them to be successful. Or we want to assist with first-time home buyer assistance. And yes, we do have a grant for that. We do contribute a little bit, but I've also heard hurdles and unnecessary processes to obtain that funding. And I think they end up only receiving maybe $1,000, which those of you who have purchased a home know it's great, but not a lot. So again, if we were to roll that beautiful footage, we would hear what the needs of our residents are. If you walk in the park, you see the needs of our residents. You talk to the residents. They have ideas that are viable for ARPA funding that meet the criteria set for the ARPA funding, as opposed to the lost revenue, willy-nilly, use it as you will funding funds that were allowable, permissible, also in the guidance documents sent to us back in 2020, 2021. So I want to, again, just document the fact that there are other needs. And yes, we do have great funding from HUD from CDAC, within CDAC that will be allocated soon. But imagine if we could use all of the money to support all of the needs or prioritize the needs that were shared with us in council. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilwoman. Any other discussion? Is the question called?
Call the question?
Question's been called. The clerk will call the roll. Mr. Clerk.
Councilwoman Resnetti,
Aye.
Councilwoman Riley,
Nay.
Councilwoman Friedman,
Nay.
Councilman Burns,
Nay.
Councilman Strawn.
Aye.
Councilman Scanlon is absent, and President Scaringi.
Nay.
Okay, that's 2 ayes, 4 nays, Riley, Friedman, Burns, and Scaringi, and 1 absent Scanlon.
Thank you, Mr. Clerk. At this time, Chair recognizes Councilman Strawn for the purposes of a motion.
Thank you, Mr. President. Yes. Council for unanimous consideration of introductory ordinance 23-70, an ordinance to amend the 2023 general fund to create the commercial facade matching grant program.
Do I have a second? Motion by Councilman Strawn, seconded by Councilwoman Resnetti. Discussion. Councilman Burns.
Thank you, Mr. President. Yeah, I think that this is, although I didn't like the process of the way we were trying to get the money for it, I think it's a fantastic plan. And I wish that I actually think that I didn't like the process of the way we trying to get the 500,000, but you know, the ARPA was meant to be a stimulus for the city. I mean, we have the least and it was going to give us the most, so we can, you know, it is a stimulus for the economy. in a big way. And this plan of a $75,000 match is going to create a big stimulus throughout the entire city. And it will create jobs. I hope that we encourage them to use union labor to make sure that all the facades are done properly. Maybe we should even put that into the grant, actually. It's a shame that it must not be, I don't know every rule precisely, but it must not be in the rules for us to use actual ARPA money for this facade program, but we've used things for less important things. I think that this is very important. It's going to help throughout the city, the facades. And so as I said, I think we can use the $3.5 million that we still have in the lost revenue line, or we could use the reserve fund that we have for this. So I will be supporting it. Thank you.
Thank you
Thank you,
again.
Councilwoman Roth. Sorry.
Thank you, Council President. That's fine. Again, I know there was, as Council Member Friedman mentioned, there was, these two items were proposed together, but anyone that is concerned, we have more than enough in our general fund to cover the cost of the match without transferring money from a lost revenue. So that we can still proceed with from the general fund as it is written without worrying about the previous legislation. And as we shared, our economic development, this shows our businesses and future businesses that the council supports business development and the maintenance of properties and upgrade of properties where our businesses dwell. And remember, some of these facades will be on residential units that are above the businesses as well. So that will increase traffic and homeowner approval, I guess, as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilwoman. Councilwoman Freeman.
Thank you, President Skirnji. I'm conflicted about this piece of legislation because, as has been mentioned, I agree with Councilman Burns that this is potentially a wonderful program, but I don't believe that the money is coming from an appropriate place. So it's like, I don't want to vote against the program, but I can't support this legislation as it is now. Sorry, I'm thinking out loud. Okay, I think that's the end of my comments for now. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilwoman. Is there any other discussion? Okay, seeing that there's no other discussion, obviously I wanted to give an opportunity for all my colleagues here just to weigh in on a substantive level, which I appreciate. However, I think it's important to note with respect to 23-70, because the funding mechanism is specifically written in the RL and is a function of the RL that just did not pass. By extension, we can't vote on this. So the chair will entertain a motion to hold over introductory ordinance 23-70. Councilwoman Ryan.
Thank you, Council President. And that's what I alluded to earlier, because it does not specify that we have to use ARPA funds. It just says from the general fund.
Correct. But from an accounting perspective, the previous RL made a debit into the general fund for that amount. So these two RLs are attached, if that makes sense. One
Okay.
being the
I do
funding
see the
which you did allude to earlier, one the funding mechanism and then one the allocation of that funding in and of itself. You weren't right. You were right about that. So because the first one failed, which is fine, that's our prerogative. By extension, we can't vote on the second one. So I'm going to, again, Councilwoman Riley.
However, we can change the revenue budget line that is written into, again, I think it's 49. So it says transfer to 49 A4999.
Right.
We can change the line and still fund this initiative.
Technically speaking, you are correct. Do you know which line that is? Because we would actually have to amend the RL in order to
Absolutely.
do that.
Um,
You are right. We could do that. Which again is not a bad idea, but
and we can
could-
hold it over until we find a line.
and that was exactly the logic in my head. Exactly. So,
Okay, awesome.
I appreciate that. Thank you, Councilwoman. Do I have a motion to hold over introductory ordinance 23-70? Councilman Burns.
Yeah. I don't see where in this RL that I have here. With this, it just says that the control of the city of Binghamton are hereby authorized and directed to amend the 2023 general fund to create a commercial facade program in the amount of 500,000. 500 increased revenue budget line. Okay, 500,000 increase.
I think that's the one. There's no increase. There's no.
Right,
money
I
to
see.
increase.
Right.
didn't-
Do you see what?
I
do you
see, yes.
Yeah,
The
do you see what
first
we're
one.
saying now?
It's
I see
I,
that.
it's point I.
I see what you're saying now. Yeah, thanks.
Thank you, Councilman. Do I have Councilwoman Rezanetti motioned to hold over introductory ordinance 23-70. Do I have a second? Motion seconded by Councilman Burns. So introductory ordinance 23-70 is held over until the next business meeting, which will fall under the category of second read legislation. Thank you, colleagues. At this time, the chair recognizes Councilwoman Rezanetti for the purposes of a motion with respect to introductory ordinance 23-71.
Thank you, Mr. President. I ask for unanimous consideration for introductory ordinance 23-71.
Do I have a second?
Second,
Motion by Councilwoman Rezanetti, seconded by Councilwoman Riley. Discussion. Please, go ahead.
An ordinance to amend chapter 265 housing and property maintenance of the code of the city of Binghamton to add a vacant property waiver fee.
Thank you, Councilwoman. Is there discussion? Councilwoman Friedman.
Thank you, President Scrungy. I was initially skeptical of this legislation, but I'm happy to support anything that would, in theory, encourage landlords to keep up their property and not let it fall into disrepair. And I also think that we can see if, if this doesn't work or it doesn't work the way that we want it to, we can always go back and change it. And that's something that makes me feel comfortable supporting it, even though, of course, the revenue from the fees will be missed, but hopefully it will be made up for in the fact that, let's say a landlord who would not otherwise be taking care of their property, we would lose the fee that they would be paying, but we wouldn't have to account for, city services to mow the grass and remove the garbage and all of that stuff. So I will support this legislation. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilwoman. Any other discussion? Is the question called?
Call a question.
Question's been called. The clerk will call the roll. Mr. Clerk.
Councilwoman Rezanetti,
Aye.
Councilwoman Riley,
aye.
Councilwoman Friedman,
Aye.
Councilman Burns,
Aye.
Councilman Strawn.
Aye.
Councilman Scanlon is absent and President Scaringi.
Aye.
That's 6 ayes, 1 absent. Scanlon.
Thank you, Mr. Clerk. At this time, the chair recognizes Councilman Strawn for the purposes of a motion.
Thank you, Mr. President. Ask council for unanimous consideration of introductory resolution 23-22. A resolution authorizing the mayor to enter into an agreement with Atlantic Testing Laboratories for vibration monitoring and condition services agreement for the Water Street parking garage.
Do I have a second? Motion by Councilman Strawn, seconded by Councilwoman Resonetti. Discussion. Seeing none, is the question called?
Mr. President?
Question's been called. Ms. Clerk will call the roll. Mr. Clerk.
Councilwoman Resnetti,
Aye.
Councilwoman Riley,
A,
Councilwoman Friedman,
Nay.
Councilman Burns,
Aye.
Councilman Strong,
Aye.
Councilman Scanlon is absent, and President Scrinch.
Aye.
That's 4 ayes, 2 nays, Riley and Friedman, 1 absent, Scanlon.
Thank you, Mr. Clerk. Chair recognizes Councilman Strawn for the purposes of a motion.
Thank you, Mr. President. I ask council for unanimous consideration of introductory resolution 23-23. A resolution authorizing the mayor to enter into an agreement with Atlantic Testing Laboratories for the special inspection agreement for the Water Street parking garage.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Motion by Councilman Strawn, seconded by Councilwoman Resonetti. Discussion. Seeing none, is the question called?
Full question, Mr. President?
Question's been called. The clerk will call the roll. Mr. Clerk.
Councilwoman Resnetti,
Aye.
Councilwoman Riley,
nay.
Councilwoman Friedman,
Nay.
Councilman Burns,
Aye.
Councilman Strong,
Aye.
Councilman Scanlon is absent, and President Scrinch.
Aye.
That's 4 ayes, 2 nays, Riley and Friedman, 1 absent, Scanlon.
Thank you, Mr. Clerk. Chair recognizes Councilman Strawn for the purposes of a motion.
Thank you, Mr. President. As council for unanimous consideration of introductory resolution 23-24. A resolution authorizing the mayor to enter into an agreement with F.E. Jones Construction, Inc. for Phase 2 PDL General Construction at Marabito Stadium.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Motion by Councilman Strawn, seconded by Councilwoman Resonetti. Discussion. Councilwoman Friedman.
Thank you, President Scringy. This is a lot of money, and I don't like that we keep getting these additional requirements that we have not met, and we need to spend hundreds of thousands of dollars more on them. And it's a tough spot to be in because I don't appreciate that. I know it's not our fault. But then the alternative is that we, might lose our baseball team, and that's, a huge loss for the city. So it's annoying, but I think it's necessary. But I wish that Major League Baseball or the Mets or whoever it was would just, let us know upfront what's going on instead of piecemeal adding these expensive requirements to the construction at the ballpark. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilwoman. Any other discussion? Seeing none, is the question called? Question's been called. The clerk will call the roll. Mr. Clerk.
Councilwoman Resnetti,
Aye.
Councilwoman Riley,
Aye.
Councilwoman Friedman,
Aye.
Councilman Burns.
Aye.
Councilman Strawn.
Aye.
Councilman Scanlon is absent, and President Scrinch.
Aye.
That's 6 ayes, 1 absent, Scanlon.
Thank you, Mr. Clerk. Thank you, colleagues. Thank you, Corp Counsel. This time we'll move on to communications from council members, and we will begin with Councilwoman Resonetti.
You. Just a couple quick things. I wanted to just mention that I went to the Children's Charity of Greater Binghamton event this past Saturday, which was in honor of Harper Stance at Breck Park. And so some of my colleagues at the park, it was just so well done. It was such a success. The weather was great. The kids were happy. Easter eggs, it was just wonderful all around. And it just kind of warmed my heart to see that as the season, the spring is here, and just to see families out. So I just big thank you and congrats to everybody who was involved with that. They did a great job. The following Saturday, 22nd, we start some of the West Side cleanups that we like to do. We enjoy, certainly my nieces and I and others who join us, and we're kind of doing this together on the same day as Binghamton Alumni Day of Service, and that's the 22nd, 1 to 3. We'll meet at Thomas Jefferson for anybody who wants to join us. Bring gloves and we'll take care of the rest as far as bags and so forth. So this will be the first one, hopefully out of, 3-4 that we like to do over the season. And my voice is still not back to normal. Just want to say happy Easter to Orthodox Christians who are celebrating this week, and any holiday that might be out there for folks. Enjoy the beautiful weather we're having. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilwoman. Councilwoman Morale.
Thank you, Council President. As you know, many good things are happening in and around the city. I'm excited about what is happening in the 3rd district. And as neighboring councilperson mentioned, this past Saturday was this tremendous egg hunt. Again, I won't go into details, but I tell you what, don't miss it next year. Hopefully, the city can donate some funds to support it, to make sure we have, again, a presence there. But it was just love, nothing but love, right? It was great. As you all know, again, I mentioned several things. So if we go back to the NOMA Community Center, which is housed right there on 30 Main Street, they have clothes, food on Saturday, cleanup coming up. Earth Day is coming up on the 22nd, so there will be some activities there. Bags will be distributed to, again, encourage neighbors and those residing in the 3rd and around to pick up and clean up in all areas of the city. Also, this week, or before we reconvene, we will be a part of the Crime Victim Assistance Center's A Tribute of Hope that happens every year at Sherry Lindsay Memorial Park. And for those of you that don't know, again, we lost a member of our community recently, and that will be our time as the city to also recognize and celebrate all that he did for the city in the city. So that's important. That will be on Tuesday, the 25th. And finally, before I shut everything down in terms of my announcements, I want to remind everyone that April is STI Awareness Month, and that is sexually transmitted infections. And why do I bring that up? Because safe, pleasurable sex is not something that is taboo. It should be welcome. But in order to make sure that it's safe, you must be tested and have conversations about being tested. And we are fortunate to have, I claim it as the 3rd district, but unfortunately, I believe it's the 1st district where the health department is. It borders the 3rd district, if you want to count Winding Way, but nevertheless, well, the old 3rd district. But we are fortunate to have a safe and private sexual health STI clinic right here in our city. That is, again, part of the Broome County Department of Public Health. So please make sure you are going out, having conversations with those you choose to engage with, you're wearing protection, and being tested. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilwoman Riley. Councilwoman Friedman.
Thank you, President Scrunchie. I did not know that April was STI Awareness Month, and that's my area of expertise. Today I learned something new. Happy Easter, happy Passover, Chag Pesach Sameach, and happy Ramadan. What an interesting time that all 3 of those holidays overlap with each other. So there is, next Saturday, there's a whole lot going on. There are a couple of events that are happening. Well, there's one event that's happening in the 4th district. The Lee Barta Pedal into Spring, that's happening at Roosevelt School from 11 to 1. I will be there, so stop by and say hi. And this is not in my district, but there's also a Workers' Memorial Day that's happening at the American Legion on Robinson Street. So I believe that's in the 7th district, right? East side, yeah. I forget the numbers sometimes.
1605.
So yes, and so that's from 4 to 6 p.m. As well as there is, I have heard rumors there's going to be a block party, but I don't have the details for that. May 3rd. Oh. Well, there's another one that's supposedly happening on the 22nd, but I don't have the details for that. So keep your eyes peeled for that. And that concludes my comments. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilwoman. Councilman Burns.
Thank you, Mr. President. The Easter egg hunt. Great community thing and great event. And I just want to mention that the Bucci family, ex-mayor Bucci, former Mayor Bucci, Nick Bucci, his wife Sue, his children Liz Bucci, and their son Peter Bucci. They worked very hard all year putting that event together. And they have the big Christmas event, as you all know, which is another great thing that they do. And I just want to thank them for giving so much to the community. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilman. Councilman Strong.
Thank you, Mr. President. I don't have much. I just wanted to thank DPW as they get started with lawn waste and things like that. Encourage people to try to get stuff out, clean up as spring is coming. The grass is starting to get green, and just help make our city beautiful with trash and yard waste and old leaves and things like that that blew all over the place. And I did notice that DPW every once in a while, well, they've been coming early in my area for recycling. Every once in a while, they will come back through if they happen to come back through and pick up a stray one. I know they don't always do that, but I noticed a couple times on a couple streets, they did pick up a few scattered blue bags or whatever that were kind of put out late. So I appreciate that whenever they can do that. And last thought was, looks like there might be a little cloud coming in tonight, but look like some nice weather for this early homestand for the Rebel ponies, especially the next 3 nights. It's going to be absolutely gorgeous. So encourage everybody to get out there and support our team early on when we have some nice April weather. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilman. Do I have a motion to adjourn?
Second.
Motion by Councilwoman Rezinetti, seconded by Councilwoman Riley. We are adjourned.